Hi, my name is Gloria Roberts. Today, we shall be discussing the topic genetics. Objectives of lesson. During the course of the lesson, the student should be able to 1. Define variation. 2. Mention the two causes of variation. 3. State the two types of variation and their examples. 4. Define the meaning of continuous and discontinuous variation. 5. Give at least 3 differences between continuous and discontinuous variation. And 6. Enumerate at least 3 applications of variation. So what is genetics? Genetics is the study of variation and inheritance in living organisms. Inheritance is also known as hereditary or heredity. Variation has to do with differences between 2 or more organisms of the same species or population. Organisms of the same species are of the same kind and they can interbreed or reproduce with one another. For example, all human beings are of the same species and so they can interbreed or reproduce with one another. Inheritance has to do with the transmission of similar traits within organisms of the same species or population. In another word, inheritance has to do with the transmission of similar traits or characters from parent to their offsprings or from one generation to another generation. So, we can say that variation has to do with differences, inheritance has to do with transmission of similar traits. In this video, we shall be discussing variation. But in genetics too, we'll be talking about inheritance. What is variation? Variation is defined as the differences that are observed within organisms of the same species or population. These differences can be morphological or physiological. Therefore, we can as well define variation as the morphological or physiological differences that exist or are observed within organisms of the same species or population. Now let's take this image as our case study. Here we have 2 sisters from the same parents showing variation or differences. And what are the differences? Number 1, skin color. One has a darker skin color and the other a fairer skin color. Another difference is the color of the hair. One has a brown-like color of hair and the other white hair color. These two are variation. Now let's talk about some advantages of variation. One advantage of variation is that it brings about new variety in species. New variety means new or different organism entirely. For example, 2 parents give birth to a child. The child is from the 2, having their 2 genes inside him or her, but there are some differences in that child that is different from the parents. Now, this new variety is better able to adapt to its environment and can resist diseases better. Variation leads to natural selection of traits, and this natural selection of traits can be inherited. Now, what do we mean by natural selection of traits? Some certain characters or traits are favorable to an organism and helps the organism to survive better in its environment. These traits are selected and over the time they can be transmitted from parents to offsprings or from one generation to another. So let's look at causes of variation. Number 1 cause of variation is genetic differences. The total genes inherited by an offspring from its 2 parents combine to form variation or differences in its features or characters. For example, a child from a male and a female parent. Now this child, we have the genes from both male and the female parent, but the child is totally different from the 2 parents. So inherited genes are responsible for variation in organisms. Also, mutation can lead to variation. Gene components or code can suddenly or spontaneously change, resulting in a different trait or features in an organism. So, we can define mutation as a sudden or spontaneous change in the genetic constituent or component leading to a change in the feature of an organism. So, genetic differences can also be called inherited characteristics. Number 2 causes of variation is environment. The environment an individual is exposed to can influence the appearance of an individual. For example, a fat person can become slim when starved of food, or someone that is light-skinned can become dark-skinned if exposed to excessive temperature or sunlight over the time, or someone that is an illiterate can become literate if exposed to modern education. So temperature, light, water, food, parental care, education, medical care, shelter are all environmental factors that can lead to differences or variation among organisms of the same species. So environment can also be called acquired characteristics. So let's talk about types of variation. There are 2 types of variation. Number 1, morphological variation. These are the differences that are observed in the physical appearance of an individual of the same species or population. Now, these differences can be seen just by looking at the organisms. For example, you have 3 organisms standing before you. Now, you notice some differences. Either one is taller or is the tallest among them, one is fairer or is the fairest among them, or one is bigger, the biggest among them all. All these observable features or characters are called morphological variation. And the second one is physiological variation. These are the differences that are not observed in the physical appearance of an organism, but can be seen in the way individuals behave, function, or react to conditions in the environment. Now, these variation or differences cannot be seen just by looking at the physical appearance of organisms. Not until they act in certain ways or behave in certain ways, these differences cannot be seen. So let's look at examples of these 2 types of variation. Examples of morphological variation in animals are 1. Color. It can be color of the eyes, color of the hair, color of the skin. 2. Height. Some organisms are tall, some are short. 3. Sizes. Some are big, some are small, some are moderate in their sizes. Then 4. Shape. It can be different in the shape of the nose, shape of the eyes, shape of the head, or even shape of the mouth. Examples of morphological variations in plants are difference in height of the plant. Some species of plants are very tall, some are short. Shape and sizes of leaves, fruit, flower stems can also be morphological variation. And colors of flowers, leaves, and fruits are observable, so they are morphological variation in plants. So let's study these images further. Here we have different starfishes, but there's something that is different about them. Yes, color. One is white, others are wine, another red, some pink, and so these differences are observable just by looking at them, and so color is a morphological difference. Here we have 2 images of 2 people with different skin color. One is white and another is black. Because it can be observed, it is morphological difference. So skin color is morphological variation. Another is height. And the last one here is what? Differences in sizes. So we have 3 beautiful ladies, or women, with different body sizes. One is slim, one is moderate in size, and one is big. These can be observed just by looking at them. So examples of physiological variation. Now this variation cannot be observed by looking at the people or individuals, Not until they behave, act, or react in a certain way, you cannot see this kind of differences. So number one is ability to taste PTC chemical. PTC stands for phenylthiocarbamide. This is a chemical that some people will taste and they will tell you it is bitter. Some will taste it and tell you it has no taste. So we have the tasters of the chemicals and the non-tasters of the chemical. Number two, ability to roll the tongue. Some people can roll their tongues, others cannot roll the tongue. Number three, ability to move the ear without turning the head. Number four, ability to close one eye and open the other at the same time. Now some people can close one eye and open the other at the same time, while others cannot do that. Number five, differences in blood group type. Number six, ability to perceive odor. Number seven, differences in behavioral patterns, such as some organisms being caring while some are uncaring. Some organisms can be aggressive, some are non-aggressive. Some organisms are timid while some are brave. All these are physiological variation. So let's look at images to help us better. The first image here is showing winking of an eye. Like I said earlier, some people have the ability to close one eye and open the other at the same time, while some, no matter how they try, they can't do it. So it's either you can do it or you cannot do that. Number two, tongue rolling. Some people, they have ability to roll their tongue, while some, they can't do that. So it's either you can do this or you can't, and not until they show you, you can't see it by looking at the physical appearance. Number three, ability to taste PTC paper chemical. Some people will taste it, they will tell you it is bitter. Others will taste it, they will tell you it has no taste. So not until they taste, you can't know anyone that is a taster or a non-taster of PTC paper or chemical. Now look at these two dogs. Now one is calm, one is aggressive. So this is a behavior that you cannot see by looking at the physical appearance. So take note, you can either be able to do this physiological variations or you cannot. So let's look at blood group and fingerprints. Blood is a liquid tissue. There are 4 types of blood groups, which are blood group A, blood group B, blood group AB, and blood group O. Now, blood group AB is called universal recipients. Why? Because this blood group can receive blood from blood group A, blood group B, blood group AB, and even blood group O. Now, blood group O is called universal donor. Why? Because it can donate blood to all the other blood groups, like blood group A, B, AB, and even O. Now, note that nobody can have 2 different blood groups at the same time. So you cannot have an individual with blood group A and blood group B at the same time. No, each person with 1 blood group. And so it is a physiological variation. Now, blood group must also be compatible before it can be transfused from one person to another. So let's talk about fingerprints. Fingerprints are impressions of the ridges at the tips of fingers. So look at the surfaces of your fingers. You will see some lines there. Those ridges are called fingerprints. Now, the main fingerprints are arch, 2, loop, 3, compound, 4, whole fingerprints. They can be sorted or arranged into different distinct patterns so that every individual has a unique fingerprint. And so fingerprint is physiological. Some say it is morphological because you can see it on the surfaces of your fingers. But note that it is unique to everyone. No 2 persons can have the same fingerprints, of course, apart from identical twins. So study these images of the different fingerprints. Types of variation can also be looked at in terms of continuous and discontinuous variation. However, note that the main types of variation are morphological, and physiological variation. So what is continuous variation? This is a type of variation that shows gradual transition from one end to another, from one extreme to another. For example, looking at the image below, we have several people arranged in a single line. Now from the shortest to the tallest person. Now the shortest is one end, the tallest individual is another end. And in between, we have people that are not as short as the shortest and of course not as tall as the tallest. Those are called the intermediate. So there is a gradual change from the shortest to the tallest or from the tallest to the shortest. So in continuous variation, there are what we call intermediates. Continuous variation is affected by environment, thus it is a morphological variation. Examples are height, color, sizes, shapes, and so on. This kind of variation obeys what we call the distribution frequency curve. Now, discontinuous variation, on the other hand, is a type of variation that does not show any gradual transition from one end to another. So, there is a sharp difference. There is no intermediate. It's either the individual can do that thing or particular art or it cannot. So, there is no intermediate. It is affected by genes, thus, it is a physiological variation. And so, it does not obey the distribution frequency curve. Examples are testing of the chemical PTC, rolling of the tongue, blood group, and so on. Let's look at the application of variation. Here we have 5 applications of variation. Number 1 is paternal determination. Blood group, physical appearance, and DNA tests can be used to know the true father of a child. If there is a dispute between two fathers claiming to have the same child, claiming to own the same son or daughter, now blood group, DNA tests can just be used to actually determine who owns the child. And of course, physical appearance, the one that has the same shape of eyes, nose, or look alike with the child can also be considered. Number 2 is identification of individual. The physical differences in individuals help us to identify them. For example, if someone that is tall commits an offense, someone that is short cannot be accused of such offense. Or someone that is fair commits an offense, a person that is dark skinned cannot be accused of committing such offense. Number 3 is crime detection. Fingerprints, DNA tests from a crime scene can be used to arrest a criminal. Now, at a crime scene, fingerprints can be gotten or sorted for and then used maybe from the database in the system to know someone that has such fingerprints, and such can be arrested either as a suspect or as the criminal. Number 4 is blood transfusion. The knowledge of blood group is needed when replacing lost blood to accident or sick people. So the blood group must match. Number 5, classification of human race. This helps to know the race of people either by looking at their skin color or the shape of their nose. Now the 4 races in the world are the Caucasoids, which are the white-skinned people with pointed nose. Now their nose are pointed, and so the Americans belong to this group. Now we have the Negroids, which are the dark skin with thick wavy hair. Now the black or the Africans belong to this group. Now we have the Mongoloids, which are the yellow brown skinned people. The Japanese and the Chinese are in this race. And the last we have the Australoids, which are people from the Australia with brown skin color. So all these are the 4 races that we have in the world. So take your time and go through them. Look at the color, the shape of the nose. It will help you to understand better. Wow, at this time we've come to the end of the class. This is our students' activity. It is time for you to go through the questions, answer them, and see how much you are able to understand from the video. Okay, if you are not able to solve any of this, don't bother. All you need to do is go back to the video, watch it again, listen to it, download it if you have to, and at the end, I believe you'll be able to answer all these 10 questions and even more questions on variation. Yes, this is the answers to the student's activity. It's time for you to mark yourself. But take note, after number 7, number 8 is A, number 9 is D, number 10 is C. Talk to your friends about this YouTube channel. Let them subscribe to my YouTube channel. Let them view my videos, download, click on the notification bell, and as much as possible, learn biology. So at this time, I want to say thank you for joining me in this class. Thank you for learning.